What if I told you that joining the wrong team at the wrong time could destroy everything an NFL star worked for? They had talent, they had drive. Some were on the rise, others already legends. But once they put on the silver and black, their careers spiraled into chaos. This is the dark side of the Raiders. Once known as the league's most feared team, the embodiment of grit, rebellion, and dominance, the Raiders became something else entirely. A place where careers went to die. A team so lost in dysfunction that it didn't just lose games, it lost greatness. Randy Moss, JaMarcus Russell, Antonio Brown, Carson Palmer, Khalil Mack. Different stories, same outcome. The Raiders brought them in with high hopes, but what followed was scandal, mismanagement, frustration, and failure. Not just for the players, but for the team itself. A graveyard of wasted potential. And still, no rings to show for it. But here's the twist. These weren't flukes. Behind every ruined career was a decision, or 10, that made it happen. And behind every failure was a chance the Raiders let slip through their fingers. In this video, we're digging deep into the careers that crumbled under the Raiders' chaos. You'll learn the shocking reasons behind each collapse, hear lesser-known facts about what really went wrong, and see how the team that broke these stars never even managed to win from it. So, if you want to know how a franchise destroyed greatness and still ended up empty-handed, stay tuned. Welcome to History of Raiders, where football meets fallout. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. Let's dive in. The Raiders didn't just play football. They built a culture, a brand, a myth. From the very beginning, they stood apart, rough, defiant, willing to hit harder, push further, and break the rules if it meant winning. That attitude came straight from the top. Al Davis, the iconic owner and mastermind behind the Raiders' golden years, was obsessed with one idea: just win, baby. It wasn't a slogan, it was a mission. Davis didn't care about popularity or style points. He wanted power, intimidation, and results. In the 1970s and early 80s, it worked. The Raiders became one of the NFL's most feared teams. Players like Jack Tatum and Lyle Alzado brought violence to the field. John Madden coached a squad that looked more like a biker gang than a football team. They were feared, hated, and respected. And they won Super Bowls. But success came with a price. Over time, the culture of toughness twisted into something else: stubbornness. Loyalty to the Raider way started to cloud judgment. Davis kept looking for the next outlaw, the next misunderstood genius, the next rebel who could revive the past. But the NFL had changed. The Raiders didn't. As other teams evolved with analytics, scouting, and structure, the Raiders stayed stuck in chaos. The front office made confusing trades, drafted players based on speed alone, fired coaches too soon, trusted the wrong people, and through it all, Davis refused to let go. After his death in 2011, the dysfunction didn't end. The franchise passed to his son, Mark Davis, who lacked his father's football instincts. He brought in big names, big contracts, and big promises, but the core problem stayed. Bad leadership, no long-term vision, too many moves made in desperation, and at the center of it all, players, some of them elite talents, got lost in the noise. What used to be a dynasty turned into a spiral, a place where good careers could go bad overnight. The Raiders didn't just lose games, they lost people. Talented players came in with hope and left with regret. This wasn't coincidence, it was a pattern, and it kept repeating. Randy Moss wasn't just fast, he was untouchable. By the time he left Minnesota, he had already cemented his place as one of the most electrifying wide receivers the NFL had ever seen. From his rookie season in 1998, when he caught 17 touchdowns, Moss made defenses look helpless and defensive coordinators lose sleep. His mix of height, speed, and sheer dominance made him a nightmare matchup and a legend in the making. So when the Vikings traded him to the Raiders in 2005, the league was stunned. The Raiders gave up a first-round pick and linebacker Napoleon Harris for one of the game's most dangerous weapons. On paper, it looked like a bold move, maybe even brilliant. The Raiders were desperate for a spark. Moss was supposed to be the fire. But what followed was anything but explosive. At quarterback, Moss had Kerry Collins, a seasoned vet, but not the kind of elite passer Moss had thrived with. The offensive line was shaky, the play calling was uninspired, and the coaching staff? Unstable at best. Norv Turner struggled to find a rhythm, and the team lacked any real identity. Instead of unleashing Moss, the Raiders misused him. Week after week, Moss was either double-teamed, ignored, or used as a decoy. His targets dropped, his numbers plummeted, and worst of all, so did his motivation.
In a rare moment of brutal honesty, Moss later said he had lost his love for the game during his time in Oakland. That wasn't just a criticism, it was a warning sign. When a generational player loses interest, something is deeply wrong. The fans knew it, the league knew it, and so did the Raiders, but they did nothing to fix it. No offensive rebuild, no coaching change to suit his strengths. Just 2 years of wasting one of the greatest talents in NFL history. Then came the trade to New England, and almost instantly, Moss was back. In 2007, he caught 23 touchdowns, a single-season record. The same player Oakland had failed to utilize was now breaking records and playing in a Super Bowl. It wasn't Moss who was broken, it was the system he got stuck in. In 2007, the Oakland Raiders held the #1 overall pick in the NFL draft. They needed a savior, someone to lead a broken franchise back to glory. They believed they found that in JaMarcus Russell. Russell was a physical specimen. Standing 6'6" and weighing around 260 pounds, he had one of the strongest arms scouts had ever seen. At LSU, he put up big numbers, capped off by a dominant Sugar Bowl performance that seemed to confirm his potential as a future star. The Raiders were convinced. They drafted him first overall and handed him a 6-year contract worth over $60 million, with nearly half of it guaranteed. From the very beginning, things went wrong. Russell held out through training camp, delaying his development. When he finally joined the team, he walked into an environment full of instability. The coaching staff was constantly shifting, the offensive line was weak, the playbook kept changing, and the franchise had no real plan to nurture a young quarterback. The Raiders didn't give him veteran mentors. They didn't build an offense around his strengths. They gave him the spotlight and expected instant success. Meanwhile, Russell struggled. His decision-making was slow. His work ethic was questioned. Whispers grew that he wasn't putting in the hours. Some claimed he relied too heavily on his natural talent and didn't adapt to the demands of the NFL. Whether that was true or not, the Raiders made no serious effort to support or protect their investment. By 2009, Russell had lost his starting job. In 2010, the team released him. He finished his NFL career with just 7 wins and 18 touchdown passes, numbers far below expectations. The media labeled him one of the biggest busts in league history, but the truth is more complex. Yes, Russell made mistakes, but the Raiders created a perfect storm of failure. They handed a raw young quarterback a fortune, then surrounded him with chaos, poor leadership, and zero accountability. They failed to develop their top pick, and in doing so, set the franchise back for years. The JaMarcus Russell story isn't just about a player who didn't live up to the hype. It's about a team that had no idea what to do with its own future. By 2011, Carson Palmer was done, or at least that's what he wanted everyone to believe. The former #1 overall pick had grown tired of the dysfunction in Cincinnati. He walked away from the Bengals, announcing a retirement that felt more like a protest than a farewell. But the Raiders were desperate, and when the season took a sudden turn, they made a move that shocked the league. Jason Campbell, Oakland's starting quarterback, had gone down with a broken collarbone. The team was 4-2 and still alive in the playoff hunt. In a bold win-now move, the Raiders traded for Palmer, hoping he could save their season. The price? a first-round pick in 2012 and a second-round pick in 2013. A massive gamble for a quarterback who hadn't played a snap all year and said he was finished with football. Palmer arrived in Oakland with little time to prepare. His first appearance was shaky. Interceptions came quickly, and chemistry took time that the Raiders didn't have. The offensive line was weak, and the coaching staff was in flux. Head coach Hugh Jackson, who had championed the trade, was fired after the season. Stability never took hold. Over 2 seasons, Palmer's numbers weren't terrible, but the wins were. In 2012, he threw for over 4,000 yards and 22 touchdowns, but the team went 4-12. The offensive line allowed constant pressure, and the defense gave up too many points. The pieces simply didn't fit. What had been billed as a high-stakes rescue turned into another chapter of Raider disappointment. Palmer couldn't elevate a broken roster, and the franchise paid a steep price in lost draft picks. By 2013, the Raiders moved on, trading him to Arizona. There, he found late career success, but the Raiders, once again, were left with nothing. The Palmer trade was more than a miscalculation. It was a symbol of a franchise trying to shortcut its way back to relevance. And like so many of the Raiders' bold moves in the 2000s, it backfired in plain sight. In 2019, the Raiders made a bold move. They traded for Antonio Brown, a superstar wide receiver with 6 Pro Bowl selections and 4 All-Pro honors. Brown wasn't just good, he was dominant. His footwork, speed, and hands made him nearly unstoppable in Pittsburgh. The Raiders believed he would be the cornerstone of their offense, the missing piece that could finally bring back respect to a struggling franchise. But what they got wasn't the player they expected. It was something far more unpredictable. Before Brown even played a single snap for the Raiders, the drama began. It started with a helmet. The NFL had changed safety regulations, banning the type of helmet Brown had worn for years. He refused to switch. He filed grievances. He threatened to retire over a helmet. Then came the frostbite incident. Brown had undergone cryotherapy, but failed to wear proper foot protection. The result? His feet were badly damaged, blistered and peeling. He couldn't practice. The media swarmed. The Raiders stayed quiet. As training camp wore on, things only got worse. Brown missed meetings. He posted private team letters on Instagram. He got into a shouting match with general manager Mike Mayock. Reports said he threatened violence. Fines were issued, apologies were made, and then taken back. Behind closed doors, the Raiders were unraveling. John Gruden and the front office tried to manage the situation, but Brown remained volatile. His social media exploded with cryptic messages and bizarre videos, including a recorded phone call with Gruden, shared publicly without consent. Then, just 48 hours before the season opener, the final blow landed. Brown asked for his release. The Raiders granted it. And just like that, one of the most hyped acquisitions in franchise history was gone. No games played, no touchdowns, no highlight moments. Just chaos. The Raiders had taken a risk on talent, but what they got was a storm they couldn't contain. Brown's career would continue elsewhere, in flashes, but in Oakland, it ended before it ever began. Khalil Mack wasn't just good, he was a force of nature. Drafted by the Raiders in 2014, he entered the league with raw power, speed, and intelligence. By his second season, he was already one of the most feared defenders in the NFL. He didn't just tackle quarterbacks, he dominated them. In 2015, he became the first player in league history to be named All-Pro at 2 different positions in the same season. That's how versatile, how destructive, and how rare he was. Mack was the bright light in a team full of uncertainty. While the Raiders bounced between losing seasons and head coaching changes, Mack gave them identity. He was the defense. He was the heart of the team. Then came 2018. John Gruden returned to the Raiders with a 10-year, $100 million contract. He wanted to rebuild, but not around Mack. Negotiations between the team and their superstar linebacker stalled. Mack wanted a deal that reflected his value. The Raiders hesitated. And just before the season began, Gruden made the call. Khalil Mack was traded to the Chicago Bears. It was a shocking move. Fans were furious. Analysts were stunned. One of the best players in football gone overnight. And the fallout was immediate. Mack exploded in his Bears debut. He forced a fumble, returned an interception for a touchdown, and sacked the quarterback, all in one half. He finished the season with 12.5 sacks, 6 forced fumbles, and a playoff appearance. Chicago's defense jumped to elite status, and Mack was the engine behind it. Meanwhile, the Raiders, they collapsed. Without Mack, the defense crumbled. In 2018, Oakland ranked dead last in sacks. The pass rush disappeared. Quarterbacks had time, receivers had space, and the Raiders lost game after game. Gruden's rebuild had started by removing its strongest piece. The team argued that trading Mack gave them draft capital. In return, they received 2 first-round picks, a third-rounder, and a sixth-rounder. But what did those picks become? Running back Josh Jacobs and cornerback Damon Arnette. Jacobs became a solid piece. Arnette didn't last. The return didn't come close to Mack's impact. And the message? Clear. The Raiders let go of greatness to roll the dice on potential. Behind closed doors, some reports claimed there was friction, that Gruden didn't want to give one defensive player that much of the salary cap, that Mack's camp felt disrespected by the lack of serious negotiation. Whatever the truth was, the result didn't change. A superstar was forced out. The Raiders didn't just lose a player, they lost leadership, they lost fear factor. Opponents didn't game plan around their defense anymore, they exploited it. Years later, even as the Raiders moved to Las Vegas and rebuild again, the absence of Mack was still felt. The trade didn't bring championships, it didn't create a defensive powerhouse. It just created a hole that was never truly filled. Mack, on the other hand, remained elite for years in Chicago. He made the Pro Bowl, earned All-Pro honors, and anchored one of the league's most dominant defenses. His career didn't collapse, but the momentum he built in Oakland, it was cut short. His best years could have been in silver and black. The Raiders let a generational talent walk out the door, and they never really recovered from it. Time and again, the Raiders brought in players who had the skills to make a difference. Some were already stars. Others had the potential to become great. Yet somehow, over and over again, things fell apart. It wasn't just about bad luck. It was about the environment, the system, the choices made behind the scenes. Take Randy Moss. When he arrived in Oakland, he was still one of the most dangerous wide receivers in the league. He had size, speed, and instincts. But the Raiders gave him nothing to work with. A weak quarterback, a disorganized offense, and no real plan. He lasted 2 seasons before moving on. And what happened when he left? He exploded in New England, breaking records and proving he still had greatness in him. Or JaMarcus Russell, drafted first overall, paid a massive contract, given the keys to the franchise, but no mentorship, no discipline, no foundation. The team didn't just fail him on the field, they failed to prepare him for the pressure. Instead of grooming a young quarterback into a leader, they let him sink. The result? One of the biggest busts in NFL history. Then there's Carson Palmer, a veteran quarterback brought in during a moment of desperation. The Raiders traded away valuable draft picks to get him. But once again, there was no support. The offensive line couldn't protect him. The coaching staff was unstable. He gave what he could, but there was no structure to help him succeed. Antonio Brown didn't even make it to Game 1. What started as a blockbuster trade turned into a complete meltdown. Helmet drama, fines, public feuds. But underneath the chaos was a familiar story. A franchise unable to manage personalities or maintain control. A team that couldn't hold the line when it mattered most. And then Khalil Mack. Homegrown talent, defensive force, beloved by fans. Traded away for picks. Why? Because the team couldn't or wouldn't pay him. He went on to become a star in Chicago. Meanwhile, the Raiders were left behind, stuck in a cycle of losing, rebuilding, and repeating the same mistakes. These stories aren't isolated. They're connected. Each time the Raiders had a shot at something great, a star receiver, a franchise quarterback, a dominant linebacker, and each time they wasted it. Not because these players weren't good enough, but because the system was broken. The front office made reckless decisions. Coaches came and went. Game plans changed with the wind. The culture that once inspired loyalty and fire became scattered and weak. What's worse, the team didn't even benefit from these collapses. There were no deep playoff runs, no titles, no rebuilding victories. Just more losses, more turnover, more regrets. The Raiders didn't just destroy the careers of these NFL stars. They destroyed their own chances at success along the way. This wasn't a team that gambled and lost. This was a team that kept gambling with no strategy, hoping talent alone would carry them through the storm. But without leadership, without structure, even the best players couldn't survive. Over the years, fans kept waiting for things to change, for the team to rise. But the pattern held. Greatness came, chaos followed, and in the end, nobody won. The Raiders didn't just destroy the careers of NFL stars. They destroyed their own future in the process. Every failed trade, every wasted draft pick, every player they mishandled was more than just a name lost. It was a chance to rebuild, a chance to lead, a chance to win. They had legends in the making, athletes with heart, skill, and drive. But instead of building around them, the Raiders let dysfunction take over. Internal chaos, poor leadership, and reckless decisions turned promise into disappointment, again and again. What's most revealing is how some of these players bounced back after leaving. Randy Moss went to the Patriots and broke records. Khalil Mack became a defensive powerhouse in Chicago. Even Carson Palmer found a second life in Arizona. They weren't the problem. The system was. While these players found new homes and redemption, the Raiders were left behind, stuck in a cycle of losing, rebuilding, and repeating the same mistakes. The cost wasn't just measured in games lost. It was measured in trust, in talent, in legacy. Greatness doesn't always fall because of injuries or age. Sometimes it falls because the very team that should lift it up tears it down instead. Let that be the real story here. If you found this video insightful, hit the like button. It really helps. And if you love deep dives into football's most dramatic moments, subscribe to History of Raiders for more stories like this one. Thanks for watching. And remember, behind every fallen star, there's always more than just bad luck.